Welcome back to What's Next? Living Longer, Better, Smarter. In this edition, Caring for Caregivers. And this episode is made possible by Vivid Pics.
So I've been in the photo business for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of things come go. But one thing has not changed, and that this wonderful thing we call a photograph captures a moment in time so that we're able to reminisce and relive those memories tomorrow. And it's important for us to do that so we can share them with loved ones and we can share them with future generations. So please don't let your memories fade. They're important.
I'm Fred Fishkin along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary. It's good to see you, recuperating from a bout with COVID.
Yes, Fred. The pandemic just doesn't want to quit. So here we are 3 years into it, and I finally got it. And then needed a caregiver and someone to help me navigate through. So it's taught many people about family caregiving, a topic that we care a lot about.
Absolutely. And that leads us into this episode, Caring for Caregivers. We're very happy to have with us Wendy Fox-Grage, Senior Policy Fellow for the National Academy for State Health Policy. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
And also Rani Snyder, Vice President for Program at the John A. Hartford Foundation. Hi, Rani.
Hey, it's great to be here.
We're very happy to have you both on the podcast with us. And we've heard how much the legislation is going through the states, how important that is. And I've been following the work of the Hartford Foundation for many years. You've been a leader in caregiving. In fact, I took Sherwin Sheik there when he was building Care Links. Right at the very beginning, we went to the Hartford Foundation.
Mary weaves everybody together here, right? So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has just released a first ever national strategy on family caregiving. Wendy, maybe you can give us a little more background on the need for this strategy and how it came about.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So many of us are caregivers and family caregivers. In fact, there's 53 million of us in this country. And family caregivers are people who are helping either an older adult or someone with a disability with their everyday activities. And caregiving is really hard work, but family caregivers in our country just have not been adequately supported. Family caregivers report much poorer health outcomes because they're really prioritizing the needs of the people they're caring for. But as you said, there's a new plan. And this came about because really through legislation to better support family caregivers. Back in 2018, the U.S. Congress passed legislation called the Raise Family Caregivers Act, which established a family caregiving advisory council that was tasked with creating the country's first, and it's very historic, national strategy to support family caregivers.
That has to be popular everywhere. So tell us more about the work you do at the National Academy for State Health Policy.
Sure, I'd love to. So our organization has been around for more than 30 years. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that our mission is to advance state health policy and solutions. And we work with all levels of state government.
So are some states advancing the goals a little further than others?
Yes, they are. The states are all really different from each other, but all of the states are the major payers for long-term care services in our country, and they're also the regulators. Each state regulates healthcare and long-term care providers. So there is such a need for even more state efforts in this area. For example, we know that family caregivers, they often tell us that what they need is a break, and that's called respite care. So policymakers at the state level can improve access to this type of care. We also know, speaking of the pandemic, and Mary, I'm so sorry you're struggling with COVID, the pandemic has really, really done a number on both family caregivers and really increased reliance on family caregivers during this time. And we had a shortage of direct care workers. Those are aides who can come into the homes and provide care. We had a shortage before, but it really heightened it now. And states can do something about that as well. They can strengthen that workforce. They often make low wages, lack benefits, lack the training that they need, and career ladders. Those are all areas where states can make advances.
Well, I just experienced rebounds, so you could have COVID and then you could have a rebound. And sometimes family caregivers don't take care of themselves, right?
That's absolutely right. They oftentimes face poor health and chronic stress, and it's associated with caregiving duties because it is so encompassing.
I think respite care is so important, and I think these career ladders for people in the care economy are so important. I mean, really, those are growth areas for companies to innovate in and for policies to change.
Rani, the John A. Hartford Foundation invests in aging experts and innovations that transform how the care of older adults is delivered. And family caregiving is one of your priority areas. Tell us more about your role in this.
Thanks, Fred. I'd be happy to. So I've worked in the area of aging for a very long time, and there's a lot of convergence between the field of aging and disability. So when I came to the John A. Hartford Foundation back in 2016, there was an opportunity to see real movement in the ways, the volume and the ways that we support family caregivers. So our mission at the foundation is to improve the care of older adults. And we, at that time, formulated a new program area around supporting family caregivers. So we have funded a variety of projects around both aging and health and specific to caregiving. So we were part of what I'll call a movement, really, to first bring about some research on family caregiving through the National Academy of Medicine. Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine is the full name of the National Academies. And then based on the findings and recommendations from that report in 2016, to push for what is ultimately this national plan. It was one of the big recommendations in that report. So we, along with partners who are other funders, who are other advocacy organizations, who are in government, have been pushing and moving this along all the way till we got to the RAISE Advisory Council that Wendy already discussed.
You released a poll this month?
We sure did. We recently released a poll that shows that there really is overwhelming support for family caregivers and for doing the kinds of things that will help caregivers. So this support, by the way, is across all political groups. It's across different ages and geographic areas, and really gender, income, you name it. And the kinds of questions that we asked were along the lines of, do you agree with the concept of providing support, providing free training for caregivers who need to perform medical tasks? Because increasingly, family caregivers are being asked to conduct medical tasks for which they are not at all trained. 94% across the board of the respondents said yes. Similarly, 93% of respondents support bringing in professional direct care workers. This is the respite work that Wendy mentioned, to give a break so that family caregivers can rest and address their own personal needs and interests. Another 93% supported providing paid time off. These are for people who are employees and also caregivers, for family caregiving, so that they can attend to their they can ultimately fulfill their caregiving responsibilities. So these are super high numbers, 94%, 93%. And I just want to point out that in our current society, 94% of people agree on almost nothing. This is showing that our time is here Our time is now.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've seen innovations in the past. A friend of mine created the caregiver cruise for family caregivers. Some people didn't come out of their cabin all week, they just rested. And then I've also heard of hotels thinking about, on Wednesday, it becomes Family Caregiver Respite Day. Let the caregiver go to the gym and just sleep for a few hours. But I love what you're saying about training, because you could be caring for a family member with Parkinson's, very different than Alzheimer's. So all of the things that you're caring for, you need training across the board. And I'm very humbled by some of the young people I see who are going into gerontology and to aging as a field, because they're caring for their grandmother right now. And that dedication starts early. But there isn't the same career ladder for caregiver, the care economy, as there is in other categories. And
Right.
we have to train on those medical, procedures they're going to be doing, because there aren't enough nurses to go into the home, right? There's a real staff shortage. So I don't want to be on a soapbox, but those are some of my thoughts, Fred.
Right. And I guess we want to talk about some of the things that our audience might want to know, specific things, the help that's maybe here, some of it, and maybe the help that's on the way, because we talk about all these problems that people are having. How can they be helped and when? I'll let you both chime in here.
So I just want to start by saying there's hope, because Mary mentioned the range of ages of caregivers. And I just want to say every one of us is a caregiver or a potential caregiver. There's this great quote by former First Lady Rosalind Carter, that there are 4 kinds of people in the world: people who were caregivers, people who are caregivers, people who will be caregivers, and people who will need caregivers. That's every one of us, ultimately. So what's really exciting is that this national plan can provide the much needed help that you're referencing, Fred. So it addresses caregivers' foremost needs. And the other thing that's exciting about it is it's going to be updated regularly. So every couple of years, there will be an update as we better understand the needs, what's in place, and what still needs to be in place for caregivers. So Wendy mentioned that there are already about 350 federal actions that are happening. This does not require additional legislation. It's a redirection of what's existing, and a commitment to setting up those guide rails for caregivers. And then there are some additional actions as well. So there are some actions that can happen at the state level, at the community level, and across the board. And there are a variety of ways that individuals can get us to that action. So first of all, speak up, support the national strategy itself. Every one of us, every person, every organization has a role here. And you can do that in a variety of ways. So if you are an individual, let's say you're a caregiver yourself, you can do a couple of things. You can speak to your own community leaders, and that may mean elected officials, but it may mean, your church. It may mean your employer, and show their support by sharing it with these organizations, individuals in these organizations, and asking them to set up a statement of support, because that's a commitment to action. Similarly, state and local policymakers should read the strategy, should be encouraged to read the strategy, and ultimately to publicly support that as well. And the last thing I'll mention with regard to supporting the strategy and to action is that all of us can go and make a comment. There's an open comment period right now that ends at the end of this month. And you can go to ACL, so that's for Administration for Community Living.gov/caregiver strategy. And you can make your own comments. And those comments will be used for the update of the strategy that I mentioned, and also for some education of the policymakers themselves.
And all that Thanksgiving right around the corner, and many of us are going to be with our families, and it's a great chance for us to ask family caregivers how they're doing and if there's any way that we can help them. So this plan really has something for everyone. I know it's a congressional plan. Yes, it's for policymakers at the federal, state, local level, but it's for all of us. It's businesses, it's organizations and communities, and for caregivers and their families.
Wendy, you're so right. That's when families get together and people notice, does mom need something more? And what can we do to help with the family? So tell us specifically, what is it that could help a family caregiver in the legislation?
So it's a plan, right? It's out, and there's so many things that could help family caregivers, right? Well, first of all, a lot of family caregivers don't identify as a family caregiver, right? They're a mom, they're a wife, they're a sister, they're a neighbor. And so that's one thing, right? We really need to raise the voice of family caregivers, and we need to help them identify, and then let them know that there are sources of help out there and where they can look for information. I think we need to really think about services and supports that can help them as they're providing care. And then we heard from family caregivers all across the country, and I'm telling you, some of the most heartbreaking things that we heard about are just the financial, and I know we've talked about some other things, but just the financial toll that caregiving can have on families. Out-of-pocket expenses, they're not nothing. On average, over $7,000 for caregiving expenses. And then a lot of families are in tough positions where they're struggling, right, with their job, or trying to keep the job and do caregiving, and with losses of about $522 billion in income every year carrying out responsibilities. So there's a lot that can be done.
That's another big issue, right? This lost wages while they're being a caregiver, and then the reentry into the workforce after. I see a role here for the private sector to take a look at these, and the investors that are going to invest in the longevity market, take a look at some of the guidelines here too. Really impressive work.
Right.
And I love when you say that there's over 90% support on the issue. It's really hard to find 90% support. So I think this could be the beginning of kind of a revolutionary plan where private sector, public sector come together and make a difference for the stressed out family caregiver.
I recall, Mary, the conversations we had with Richard Louie at MSNBC, who did a documentary and a book about caregiving, that he, in caring for his father, had gone to his employer, MSNBC, and said that he needed to cut back his work hours, and he was worried what the response might be. And the response was from his boss, "Well, I'm in that situation too." And I'm just wondering if we're seeing more understanding in this, in this potential tug of war between employers and employees about needing time to care for people. Is there more understanding, do you think, today?
I'd say we're building it. So there are 5 overarching goals in this plan. And one of those is on ensuring financial and workplace security. So there are 2 things, right? Financial is for the individual, workplace is about the employer. And there are a variety of sort of subheadings of, the areas where we are building this awareness and strength. And they include things like financial planning, specifically for family caregivers. They include things like, now this is to what you were saying, Fred, employee-centered flexible work plan, policies and practices that help employees themselves. They include things like help with planning for long-term needs of the people that caregivers are caring for, and thinking through affordable options for the kinds of services and the kinds of supports that people need to age in place. So these are all under that very large heading. And yes, I do think there's a growing, increasing support for those across the board. But you're right, there's always going to be a tug of war.
And again, I think state policy can play a real role here as well. Just some examples: expanding employment protection so people don't get fired because they're a caregiver. Guaranteeing caregivers that they can get unemployment if they have to leave their job because they're caring for someone. And then ensuring that there's paid family leave laws in the states that cover family caregiving.
What about the role, and we've read, and I don't know specifically where it exists today, of government and actually paying family caregivers the way they would pay private caregivers?
Well, we saw that take off quite a bit during the pandemic, in fact. So there are many states that have, through their Medicaid programs, which are aimed for people who are at lower income levels, allowing them to use some of the dollars for their family members to get paid. However, I do want to stress that most family caregivers are not paid. And in fact, as we spoke about earlier, that's the other way, right? That they spend a lot of out-of-pocket money. But yes, we are seeing that increasingly in states being able to use some of those public dollars. And again, it varies greatly state by state.
And would it require training of a family member, say an adult grandchild or something like that? Some kind of training for them to qualify to be a paid caregiver?
Yes, and again, that also really varies state by state and program by program, but yes, some of those do require training.
Well, I see a real role for community colleges, for online training, for kind of a national movement, if you will, to rally around these initiatives. And your work is so important at the foundation and with the states. We see a lot of the entrepreneurs getting deals done across the states for innovation. And yet it's still kind of a mystery. How do you go from state to state? So I think everyone's going to want to meet you. And for the seniors watching our show, which is our podcast, they could tell the family caregivers that are caring for them about this initiative. Don't you think, Fred?
Absolutely, and get all of the support. Can you tell us again where people can turn to get more information about this and how they can better participate, perhaps?
Glad to. So the website you can go to is ACL for Administration for Community Living.gov, and it's /caregiver strategy. Look, caregiving happens. It happens to all of us. So it's wonderful when any one of us, when all of us come together and support this strategy broadly and think about the ways we can apply it in our own communities and for the people we care about.
Wendy, is there a place people can go to learn more about the work that you're doing?
Sure. They can go to our website, which is nashp.org. That's NASHP.org. We've got all kinds of resources for state policymakers and even more information about the plan, because to support the council's work, NASHP has our RAISE Act Family Caregiver Resource and Dissemination Center. So we have a whole center that's devoted just to this work and making sure that family caregivers can get this much needed help.
The issue has been around forever. There were caregivers probably back in caves. So seriously, but to see the progress that is all of a sudden seemingly taking place now is certainly heartening.
We were thrilled to have you on to shed a light on your important work. And I hope that this holiday, this Thanksgiving, whether you're taking care of someone close or far away, that this is a topic at the table, that people can spread the news, and also that you can tell the people in the neighborhood, that you can let them know, because, spreading the word when we are all somewhat still isolated in our homes, everyone needs to know this kind of news. So we're thrilled to have you on, and just getting it passed into the stage and now to build awareness. It's part of what we're committed to do, right, Fred?
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Rani.
Thank you both so very much. We really appreciate you having us on and spreading the word about the plan. It's going to take us all.
This is really important. Thank you so much.
Mary, you and I have talked about caregiving, how difficult it can be, sometimes stressful, with people juggling jobs along with providing care. So much great information in this podcast. It's a good time to be thinking about maybe little things that can help ease that stress.
Yes, I'm always honored by the work that Pat does as a caregiver because her mom is 101 and a half. And here I am with COVID, and she shows up with a casserole at my front door the other day, which she left on the porch. But I think how nice it is to take care of your neighbors. You know, caregiving isn't just one person that you take care of. It can often be many people that you take care of. And you have to think about how can you get good at being a caregiver. And part of that is self-care. Part of that is training. Part of that is knowing the resources. So I love the fact that 90% of the people are supportive of this.
That's because everybody eventually is part of the caregiving ecosystem, so to speak. But burnout after COVID, coping with higher prices for everything, sometimes just watching the news, is a feeling that grips a lot of people these days. So all of these little things can make things better.
And I think also training makes you feel more confident in the task. If you find out that a loved one, which could happen in 9 hours, not like 9 months when you're having a baby, that suddenly you're a caregiver for someone who has ALS or MS or Parkinson's, that's a long journey. You know, that quote about you take care of your children a shorter time than you take care of your caregiving responsibilities. So 18 years raising a child, but it might be 22 years in the caregiving role.
One never knows. So this was really terrific, Mary, and we want to thank all of our viewers and our listeners. And I know you want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You know, it's my favorite holiday, Fred. I love the fact that we can gather around and have a simple meal and enjoy our family. But also, I like the care that goes on in the neighborhoods. And this is a time in our lives where we should be really thinking about the other people. You know, there's so many people that live alone, and just a phone call, a text, you know, a bouquet of flowers, a kind word. There's a lot to be grateful for. And I'm really grateful for you and for Linda and for our team that puts this together, and for our viewers, and also to Spiro for helping us get out into so many senior communities. This is the news that we want to share. It's kind of revolutionary. It's taken a long time in coming, but it's so important that you get to know it. And so enjoy this beautiful holiday.
Thanks, Mary. The feeling is mutual. And we also want to again thank Wendy Fox-Grage and Rani Snyder for spending time with us. Of course, we thank our sponsor, Vivid Picks. Don't let your memories fade. Find more at vivid-pix.com. A quick reminder that the What's Next Longevity Innovation Summit is coming up soon, December 7th and 8th in Washington, D.C., and on the 13th virtually. Find more at washingtoninnovationsummit.com. And we're going to throw a code out there if you would like for a registration discount. Use FOM20 for that. You can always find us at maryfurlong.com/podcast. And we're also now being carried by Spiro 100, reaching hundreds of senior living communities and thousands of individual subscribers as well. Find more at home.spiro100.com. Thank you for spending time with us, and happy Thanksgiving.